Welcome to the special meeting of Full Council this evening. I am the Mayor of Rugby, Carolyn Watson-Merritt, and will be chairing the meeting. This meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, if you wish to speak, please use the push to talk button on the microphone in front of you. Before we begin the formal agenda, I will ask the Chief Executive to provide details of the evacuation procedure for those present.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everybody. There's no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors, and congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will give instructions on when it's safe to return to the building.
Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies, Chief Executive?
Madam Mayor, I have apologies from Councillors Mahoney, Mistry and Ellis.
Madam Mayor, also Councillor Dr. Mark Williams.
Thank you. Now I'll move on to item 2, to approve the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 14th of December 2022. I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 14th of December 2022 be approved and adopted. Who will second the motion?
Is it possible to make a point of order on the minutes?
Councillor Moran, just through you, Mayor, if you can set out what the point of order is in the first instance, please.
Yeah, no, certainly. So, in relation to item E on the Council's constitution, I think two elements are rather missing from the minutes that are quite relevant. Obviously, the live stream was suspended, and I think in the interest of the Council's constitution to promote public participation in the Council, there should be reference to why the live stream was suspended. But most importantly, Section 15 of the Council Standing Orders on voting, I think it's important to have clarification on the position if councillors leave the chamber during the debate, whether they can vote in that motion. The minutes are silent on those, and I think that's quite important.
Just through you, Mayor, in addressing the points that Councillor Moran has outlined, my initial views would be that in terms of live stream, that it is an illegal requirement. In terms of live streaming meetings, it is an optional requirement that the Council undertakes through its meetings, and it was undertaken during that particular meeting. In terms of your second point of the particular vote that took place, that's outlined within the live stream and was addressed during the meeting itself, and is open and transparent as to what took place during the meeting and the voting. Just liaising with the Chief Executive, and if you're happy with this proposal, Madam Mayor, we can defer this particular item to look into the matters that Councillor Moran has addressed, and that can be addressed at the next meeting, and this item can be deferred.
Just helpful, just to clarify for everyone's benefit, that's all. Yeah.
So, Madam Mayor, we'll vote to defer the approval of the minutes, and we'll look for the Deputy Mayor to second that.
Right, we shall now vote to defer the approval of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 14th of December 2022. Those in favour of that deferment, who will second the motion? Thank you.
I will, Madam Mayor.
So those in favour of the deferment, please show. And those against, please show. The motion. Oh, you have to count. Those in favour of the deferral, could you please raise your hands and keep them up? Thank you, so we can count again. Those against, please show and keep your hands suspended. Right, thank you very much, councillors. We have the count of 21 against the deferral and 16 for the deferral. So on that basis, the motion is defeated. So now we shall go for approval of the minutes. I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on the 14th of December be approved and adopted. Who will second the motion?
I will, Madam Mayor.
Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Item 3, declarations of interest. Can I also remind members that when they declare interests, they must also declare the general nature of that interest? Are there any declarations under A, non-pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for councillors? B, pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for councillors? And C, notice under Section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge of council tax. Moving on to item 4, Mayor's announcements. 4A, I was deeply concerned to hear of the 2 devastating earthquakes that struck southeastern Turkey near the border with Syria on Monday. Thousands of people are dead and many are injured. Freezing temperatures have left thousands exposed to extreme cold, and now many are without shelter. Hundreds of people remain trapped under rubble, needing urgent support. The impact has been devastating in areas that already host a high number of displaced and vulnerable families who need urgent humanitarian assistance. I know that many of our residents in Rugby will want to help. Details of aid agencies that have opened public appeals can be found on the Disasters Emergency Committee website. If the Disasters Committee website launches its own appeal, we will share details with our residents. I would ask everyone present to please stand with me and reflect on the plight of everyone affected by this disaster. So for that, we will have a moment's silence, please. I thank you, councillors. 4B, I was delighted to attend the Rugby Ukrainian group's Christmas Eve celebrations last month at Paddock Methodist Church. Mothers and children, together with their family hosts from Rugby and volunteers, enjoyed an evening of traditional food and entertainment. I was also very touched to be gifted a beautiful blouse from the Kherson region of Ukraine from this particular group in Rugby, and we will expand on that in our next council meeting. Item 4C, it was a privilege to attend at the Rugby Art Gallery and Museum the closing event for the new Crossfire 1981 exhibition. Many of you who saw the community come together here and reflect on the lives lost and shared treasured memories of those who were so cruelly taken away that night. The emotional event brought families together and friends, many of whom were from Rugby, who have lived with these memories of this tragedy, which 42 years on remains a defining moment in British history. For so many survivors, friends and family, the emotional impacts of those events 42 years ago remain raw to this day, but all show dignity and a determination to keep the memories of loved ones alive and make sure our community here in Rugby grows stronger together and moving forward. I would like to extend my congratulations to Lorna Taveras, Yvonne Ruddock's cousin, and the driving force behind the exhibition, and Robert Ruddock, the only surviving sibling of the fire, both whom spoke at the event. It was a pleasure to hear their stories. Item 4D. I will be hosting a bingo charity night in aid of my charity, Rugby Food Bank. This will be held, and if all of you could put it in your diaries, please, on the 21st of April. It's a Friday evening at 7 p.m. at the Rugby Railway Club, and I would love as many of you councillors to come along and share in that evening. There's some great prize money. The event is open to all members of the public, as well as all members of and officers here of the council. We're going to raise vital funds for this charity, the Rugby Food Bank charity. Tickets cost £12 each and include the entrance fee, bingo books, and a charity donation. These can be purchased from the Mayoral and Civic Office at Democratic Services and or from the Railway Club. And we have lots of members, hundreds each month. And as you can tell from the prize money, it's been generously attended, very supported. And those who have been, I'm sure, will join us on the night. Right, moving on to item 5, questions pursuant to Standing Order 10. Are there any questions, Chief Executive?
Madam Mayor, there's one question which has been circulated to all members in advance along with the answer and published on our website. The question is from Councillor Srivastava and relates to the number of children and dependents in Rugby who are currently homeless and living in temporary accommodation.
Councillor Srivastava, do you have a supplementary question?
No, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Lowe, for responding.
Item 6A, to receive the report of Cabinet dated the 9th of January 2023. In submitting the report of Cabinet, if members wish to raise questions or to comment, will they please indicate they wish to do so when I call the item. Councillors, Mrs Crane, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 1, the report of Cabinet of the 9th of January 2023?
Madam Mayor, I so move.
Paragraph 1, Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Proposals. I call on all speakers. Councillor Crane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this relates to the Government's Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, which is a fund to help social housing landlords to help them deliver energy efficiency improvements to homes whilst at the same time reducing carbon emissions and helping to tackle fuel poverty. And bids were invited for wave 2 of this fund, which applied to social housing properties at very low EPC bands. And we've submitted this bid from Rugby. A decision is going to be announced by the end of March, and we're keeping everything crossed that we will get this funding and be able to take forward this really important work. It's to add external wall insulation to the Wimpy No Fine properties in 2 estates in Long Lawford and Rokeby. And I think it'll be really important work and make a real difference to people who live in those properties. So hopefully we will get this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor New.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome the recommendations in this report and the external wall insulation that is being proposed for houses on Rokeby and in Norfolk. But one of the issues I have a concern about is a lot of those houses have now been bought privately. And I think it would be nice if the people who are in some of the private houses could be offered some ideas on grants that can actually improve their properties as well, so that it's not a mismatch of houses with some with external and some not, which might make the aesthetic view of the houses not so good. So it would be nice if a possibility that people could be offered some support, because there are a lot of grants, as you know, available to people. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Crane, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point that Councillor News made, and we can certainly look into that. And if we're successful with the funding, we'd look at ways to open it up to others. Thanks.
Any further speakers? I now submit for confirmation and adoption the whole of the report. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Item 6B, to receive the report of Cabinet dated 6th February 2023. In submitting the report of Cabinet, if members wish to raise questions or to comment, will they please indicate so by they wish to do so, or when I call an item. Councillor Picker, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 1 on the report of Cabinet 6th February 2023?
Madam Mayor, I so move.
Are there any further speakers who would like to speak on this item? Councillor Picker.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and it gives me great pleasure to move this report this evening. And before I move on to cover what the report says, I just want to thank those who contributed to the drafting of the supplementary planning document, including Planning Services Working Party and the Climate Emergency Working Group. So this document will form part of our overall planning and climate change strategies, and it will sit within that wider framework. However, as we adopt this policy, it will then form a material planning consideration for any future applications that come before this borough. It will provide an outline of our expectation for developments to meet high standards of sustainability and energy efficiency within the framework of our existing local plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. It covers a range of guidance on issues such as renewable energy, sustainable drainage, waste storage, and design principle matters as well, and will support planning applications as they come forward and the planning committee in determining those applications. I'm pleased to say that it will support sustainable development in terms of increasing biodiversity gain and green infrastructure, which I know from my time on the planning committee are issues that matter greatly to members, and I can see Councillor Sanderson nodding. I'm sure there are a couple of nods behind me as well. So it represents an important step in our work on these issues, but I do just want to be clear to Council that I don't view this as the end of this process. It is a process that we'll continue to take forward, in particular as we move forward with the local plan review and in our forthcoming response to the revisions to the National Planning Policy Framework, which I look forward to discussing with members of Planning Services later this month. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor
Crane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to echo what Councillor Picker said, that I really welcome this report, and I think it is a really important next step on our climate change and environmental work, and really hope to see a lot of developments coming through that really champion some of these issues and take forward, particularly on biodiversity and energy efficiency. Thank you.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. excuse me if I don't get too excited about this supplementary planning document. We had a local plan developed a long time ago, and we were told it would be the greatest thing that ever happened, and everything would be looked after and controlled, and we wouldn't have problems with this and wouldn't have problems with that. Now, whilst I know a lot of the stuff's very positive in there, but the problem is, wouldn't it be nice, instead of material difference, it was, we will do this, we will make sure that we're building sort of sustainable communities and sustainable homes. We will make sure that we're looking at how we can actually reduce our carbon footprint. But it's not a natural, is it? And we've seen that with affordable housing. We've not met any of those sort of national sort of 40% figures that we wanted to. And whilst, yeah, it's all good, and I'm not going to say I'm against the wording of it. I'm not. But the reality is, it's all words. It's rhetoric. How are you actually going to make sure this actually happens? Because what the people see in Rugby is not a positive in terms of the pollution that we're seeing, the amount of infrastructure issues that we're facing. And here we have another document. What difference will it make to the people of Rugby? That's what I want to know.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll continue in a similar vein to Councillor O'Rourke. And I think it's a few weeks since it was at Cabinet and a few weeks since I read the document. I was just checking over my notes. I think there's no doubt about it. You know, we recognise the importance of it. There's a huge amount of detail in it, but there's a lots of could be considered, particularly on the I think energy information list that may need to be provided, and there's different requirements for large and small sites, buildings, renovations, extensions, etc. So I assume material consideration is the strongest measure we can use. I assume that is legally the strongest thing, so that's fine if that's the case. But I think my question is, what reassurances can the portfolio holder provide that the SPD will always be used, considered, and how will this be evidenced on every application? Thank you.
Councillor Moran.
I just wanted to follow both speakers there, just in relation to the council's own projects, and obviously the council, where the council is owner, developer, can take a leading light to demonstrate that sort of good practice. And as this policy comes to life, it would be great if the council can do that.
Any further speakers? Councillor Picker, would you like to...
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, in terms of the document as it moves forward, it as a material planning consideration and as a document that this council adopts, it will be considered against every planning application. So they will have to comply with these standards when they come forward. It will be referenced in every officer's report, and it will be delivered as part of that. Councillor Moran, I fully agree with you that as a council, when we bring forward developments, they should be of high quality. So we will do that, and I'm sure we'll hear a bit more about that in a few minutes. And just sort of touching on, I think the overarching theme that I think I was getting from the opposition benches is that they'd like us to go further. I would like us to go further as well. I think there is opportunity to go further. That's why I came to this council to propose we review the local plan to address some of these issues. You all voted against that.
I now submit for confirmation and adoption the whole of the report. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Item 7, to receive the report of officers. The next item is to receive the report of the Chief Officers for Communities and Homes and Finance and Performance, set out at item 7A of the agenda. The report concerns the Council's draft HRA capital and revenue budgets for 2023-24, together with its medium-term financial plan for 2023 to 2027. Councillor Mrs Crane, will you move the report?
Madam Mayor, I so move.
Who will second the motion?
I will second the motion, Madam Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
Councillor Crane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank officers for all of their hard work in reaching a balanced HRA budget and medium-term financial plan. I know an awful lot of time has been spent on this. The last few years have been extremely challenging for this council and for the people of Rugby. Whilst the pandemic is now thankfully behind us, we're still recovering from the impacts of it. And we now also see the war in Ukraine impacting the cost of living for all of us, driving inflation rises and an energy price crisis. But in spite of this, people in Rugby have opened their homes to those fleeing the war. And as we saw during the pandemic, it's during difficult times that we see our communities coming together to offer support to those that need it. It's against this challenging backdrop that the recommendations come before you today. What's proposed will allow the Council to continue to provide high levels of service to tenants, whilst at the same time investing in our homes so that they're fit and resilient for the future. Investing to ensure that those with the coldest and least energy efficient homes are made more energy efficient, and this will help to combat rising energy price costs, making homes warmer and cheaper to heat, whilst also reducing carbon emissions. Progressing with our plans to move people away from homes heated by expensive and high carbon fossil fuels and retrofitting properties to be heated by cleaner energy. Making sure we've got sufficient funds to continue to invest in updating kitchens, bathrooms and boilers and keep properties in a good state of repair, that's vitally important for our tenants. And continuing to provide high quality advice and support to our most vulnerable households to ensure that homelessness preventions are delivered, supporting those in tenancies to sustain them and maintaining the important partnership working in our community and voluntary sector is vital. This last year has been a tough time for officers and staff in delivering services. As has been the case for many organisations, the service has been impacted by significant staff changes and an increasingly competitive employment market. And I want to thank all officers for their hard work, and particularly I want to thank Michelle Dixon for her support. In spite of all the challenges, there have been many successes, and I want to take the opportunity to highlight some of these and the progress made over the last year towards our objective of making sure that Rugby residents have access to high quality, affordable and environmentally sustainable homes. Regeneration projects have been progressing well, with round gardens successfully decanted, deconstruction works underway and plans for the future homes being developed. This is a challenging and exciting project with plans for 211 brand new, high quality, energy efficient and sustainable social homes to replace those that are being lost. And the Byart Place development, due to start later this year, will provide a further much needed 100 homes for social rent. And it was fantastic news that we were able to secure 8.8 million of grant funding. Building homes to EPC rating A, the previous flats were rated E. Using heat pump technology, maximising options for solar PV and for green space and biodiversity, these homes will be environmentally sustainable as well as creating a vibrant new community. Acquisitions of new homes continue, with 17 anticipated to have completed by year end, and registered provider partners delivering a further 112 affordable homes in the borough in the first half of this year alone. Our future capital programme means we'll meet, and I hope surpass, the Decent Homes standard. There are plans for 140 kitchen replacements and 120 bathroom replacements this coming year. And we are continuing with our ambitious plans to reach net zero, and the capital programme reflects the financial commitment towards improving the energy efficiency of our housing stock. As I just mentioned, we're awaiting the outcome of the recent bid to the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, which will allow us to undertake external wall insulation of 112 solid wall, hard to heat properties in Long Lawford and Rokeby. A new post within the asset team will help officers deliver on the decarbonisation work over the coming year. In terms of the day-to-day service provision, which is so vital, our in-house outreach team continues to support some of our most vulnerable formerly homeless clients to learn the skills needed to maintain a tenancy and to move into training and employment. Our housing services team continues to adapt its tenancy and estate management services to the new challenges customers are facing, in particular helping those caused by the rising cost of living and working hard to reduce antisocial behaviour. The rollout of RentSense, the rent arrears monitoring software, has been a resounding success, enabling a targeted and informed approach to income monitoring and integrating with the new housing management system to provide a full picture of a customer's current position and needs. We're taking a proactive and collaborative approach to tackling damp and mould by using a case management system to track progress on individual properties, enabling prompt action and clear responsibilities, additional training for staff in how best to advise tenants, and carrying out 200 additional property inspections since November, prioritising those properties most liable to cold. The co-location of the property repairs service to the town hall means closer team working, with a particular focus on improving void turnaround times. The property repairs service is part of the operations and traded services portfolio, and so to further improve collaborative working between the two services, a service level agreement has been developed between the two chief officers to help to clarify the responsibilities of both parties in respect of repairs and void management. Improving communication with our tenants has been a key priority during this year, with the relaunch of the Tenants newsletter and the Tenants panel. Of course, all of the above fantastic work does come at a cost, and the HRA relies on the rental income from our properties to maintain the level of service provision and to enable the capital programme to continue. It's never an easy decision to raise rents, but what we charge for rents must be balanced against being able to effectively run the service, address future housing needs and pressures, and progress improvement works and projects to provide those new high-quality, socially rented homes for the people of Rugby. With inflation running at over 10%, increasing our rents by the usual guidance of CPI +1 would have led to rent increases of over 11%, and we're particularly conscious of the challenges being faced in the current economic climate and the impacts of a rent increase on our tenants. So capping the rent increase at 7% provides a sensible balance and both recognises the challenges of the rising cost of living, whilst also reflecting the corresponding rising costs of delivering the services. And as the figures in the report show, Rugby will still be the landlord with the lowest rents in the borough. And finally, I also want to mention service charges here. It's important to note that we can only apportion these costs amongst the pool of tenants that are in receipt of those specific services, which is why they're depooled from rent charges. Members will have noted that there are some large increases. These are due to rising energy prices, which are outside the Council's control, and in particular in relation to the communal heating systems at 3 sheltered housing sites. It's also important to note that this particular item is in effect a utility cost which is applied to individual properties for the gas that they use from the communal boiler system, rather than a specific service charge. It's simply passed on to the residents from the energy company via the council and reflects the rising energy prices that everyone is currently facing. In addition to the energy price guarantee, the government is providing additional help for vulnerable residents, and the council and all of its partners stand ready to provide advice and support where needed. With this budget, we are delivering what is right for Rugby, both now and into the future. And I hope that members will support the recommendations in this report and this balanced and sensible budget and medium-term financial plan.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Roodhouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I move the Liberal Democrat amendment that's been circulated and that everybody's seen? And in so doing, I'll just say a few words, and I know my seconder, Councillor Sanderson, will probably turn to the 258% increase for communal charging around those particular units which Councillor Crane spoke about. There's just a number of points, really.
Can I just second that and reserve the right, Madam Mayor?
In relation to the amendment, but also a slightly wider point. And the first one is that the report that lands with us tonight is probably one of the same reports I've seen in the sense of layout for the last 20 odd years, apart from the odd, the wording changes, but the layout stays roughly the same. It doesn't really change. So one thing I'm asking the portfolio holder tonight is we are the landlords of all these properties. The stock is changing. The people that live in those properties is changing. And I personally like to see greater analysis and management information coming through as appendix to this particular report, telling me, the people that we've got living and those particular properties and the styles, and so we have a greater understanding of what we've got. And I think there is a case to actually say, could we bring that forward, and for next year's, let's see whether we can get a different layout and a different way of producing the report, and get off the 20-year-old or however long it's been going cut and paste job that basically we get really every year. That's point one. The 7%, of course, that's the maximum we can do. Local government settlement and everything else. At the time, the government said it's 7%, it's capped, that's it. So it's not down to our choice, really. The government has told us 7%, so that's where we've gone when we've maxed that out. We could go lower, of course, if we wanted to. I'm not sure what would happen if we tried to go higher. I don't know anybody, unless you're Croydon, of course, on council tax, then the Secretary of State, you can get 10% council tax. In relation to, didn't you know that? Yeah, Secretary of State yesterday. There's Thurrock and that as well, but I think they can do 7% or something. I don't, but Croydon is 10% because they've gone bust. In relation to our stock, I think I would agree with Councillor Crane. And I do want to thank the Housing Department, the housing team, and Michelle Dixon for the way that the ethos and the culture within that department has changed. And I've noticed that myself as an elected member, and can I thank the Chief Officer for that. But as we all know, there's still further to go in relation to those changes of how we work with our tenants and how we actually change those particular properties going forward. The climate change agenda is on there, and it's within the plans that are coming forward. Now, basically, we're all on the same hymn sheet in what we want to try and achieve, but I think there are specifics and priorities that we want to try and do, which I know Councillor Sanderson will touch upon when he comes to speak upon that. So without any further ado, Madam Mayor, I'll leave the amendment there at this point in time.
Thank you, Councillor. Can we move to the amendment from the Conservative group? Councillor Picker.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move the amendment and reserve my right to speak.
Who will second that?
Mayor, I'll second the motion and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think I want to start by following up on what Councillor Roodhouse has just said, that I think on this issue we are broadly in the agreement on the challenges that some of our vulnerable residents face and on the steps we need to take to address that. The purpose of what I hope is a friendly amendment to your amendment this evening is to sort of broaden the scope of the issues that you've raised, and they are important issues, and I know that Councillor Sanderson will speak about some of the specific cases, but what I want to do is make sure that everyone in our borough who needs that help, who are our tenants, get that help, and so that's what I'm driving at with this amendment. As Councillor Crane has said, much of this work is underway. However, there are certainly some areas where I think we could go further, and which we could look at, and I think others will speak on that in a moment. And I hope that the portfolio holder and the Chief Officer will reflect on that and we can move forward with this. The other thing I wanted to touch on is that the original amendment referred specifically to PV panels. And I think it's important that we don't just look at photovoltaic panels and solar panels, that we look at the full range of options that we can do on these buildings. So again, that's the reason for the slight change in wording, and also to not just look at a small number of specific properties, but look across the entire area at what we can do. And I also just wanted to touch on one of the discussions we had yesterday about looking at emerging technologies or advancing new technology. So I do think there is a wider body of work here to be done. So that comes to the reasons I've submitted this amendment, and I hope you'll support it.
Just a point of clarification, Madam Mayor, for the benefit of members. The amendment and the friendly amendment have now been moved, so we'll move into the debate focused on the amendments that have been proposed. Once we've taken a vote in respect of those amendments, we will return back to the substantive motion and have a debate in respect of the substantive motion.
Councillor Sanderson.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just on the amendment to the amendments, I love those. I mean, my concern is it's assuming the tenants are getting all the services that are on the list. In terms of Leslie Souter House, no communal window cleaning, no cleansing of the pathway from Hillmorton Road into the building, except on one day of the year, on Remembrance Sunday. That's all they get. To the rear of the building, on the emergency fire escape, to what's supposed to be a fire assembly point, there is one light, but one light. And I can show you a picture of that on my phone afterwards. So the tenants called me in about it last June, saying, look, things aren't happening, things aren't being done. What can you do about it, Councillor? And these are some of the issues I've had to, almost like walking through treacle to try to get resolved. And if that's, and remember, Leslie Souter is supposed to be one of our better schemes. So there are quite a lot of problems that we have with the current service charges, let alone a new service charge. You're almost adding insult to injury by putting up the service charges on those 3 blocks by 258%. If you add that to the rent, that's an extra £40 a week they have to find. An extra £40 a week. Now, when you made this decision in Cabinet, you should have perhaps been a bit quicker on your toes and looked at the Housing Support Fund, which is currently being managed by Warwickshire County Council. The Household Support Fund may enable some of those tenants to get vouchers, possibly towards their heating, possibly to replace the Meals on Wheels service, which has now been withdrawn. So there is help out there, but it's about 30 to 32% of the tenants who don't get housing benefit, don't get universal credit, and don't get pension credit are the ones who are going to lose out the most. So we do need to get our teams in there quickly, because you only have until the end of March to make a claim, and they don't do any backdated claims. So I'm hoping that the portfolio holder for Homes and Communities will take that on board, because obviously it's her responsibility, and that we will look at that. In terms of the heating, the longer they have to claim benefits, the more likely they are to get into debt. And that's debt on their service charge. And that may not be recoverable. Certainly, I had a look at the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985, which makes it a duty, a responsibility of this council to notify our tenants of any excessive change to their service charge. And you must admit, 258% is quite excessive. But the tenants are entitled, have a legal right to written notification of that increase. The tenants have a legal right to challenge those figures. The tenants have a legal right to see a breakdown of those costs. That's called a Section 20 consultation. So the tenants have a right to be consulted before it's imposed. So I would ask members of Cabinet to certainly look and make sure that that is in fact actioned. Now, in terms of my big concern is if they then get caught in a benefits trap, and if they're trying to get off of those benefits, they'll get in arrears, and if they get into arrears, they could possibly have a threat to their tenancy or legal action against them. And that's my big concern on these three very sheltered housing blocks. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Roodhouse.
Thank you. On the friendly amendment, we're willing to accept the friendly amendment, by the way. I forgot to mention that, didn't I? Going forward, so we're happy to accept that and build that into the main amendment. Is that all right?
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I particularly welcome our amendment because it expands this to include all residents. And in my ward, Hill Morton, I have a fairly high number of council residents and sheltered housing schemes, and the amendment will actually include all of those, whereas the original one was specific only to three particular areas. So I shall support our amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Parker. Thank you.
Councillor Roodhouse, we're in agreement. Hell's frozen over, because I'd like to see more information in the report. Even a stop clock's right twice a day. Yeah, I'd like to see more information in the report, because you know how much I love facts, because facts don't care about feelings or getting emotional. And I took the liberty of having a look at some other facts tonight, because while no one wants to put rents up, spare a thought for people in the private sector. So I spared a thought for them today at 5:30, and I'm going to present some facts about the Rugby rental market. We own 3,443 properties. Tonight, at 5:31 p.m, there are 152 properties for rent, privately, advertised on the Rightmove website, within 5 miles of Rugby. The cheapest property to rent tonight at 5:51 p.m. is 1 room in a shared HMO. It is £425 per calendar month, exclusive of utilities. I'd remind members that the report we have tonight shows us that the average weekly rent for a social home in Rugby is £91, less than £400 a month. The highest rental property within 5 miles of Rugby tonight is a 5-bedroomed house in Newbold. It looks lovely. It blinking should be for £2,600 a month. But if you've got a large family, that's what you're facing. And the average 4-bed tonight was £1,650. So I think that it is useful, Councillor Roodhouse, for Council to be presented with the facts, the realities that face hard-working families across the borough that are not fortunate to be resident under the best landlord in the borough, and that's ours. Thank you.
Councillor Rabin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you. Over the last 12 months, I've frankly grown tired of the petty point scoring and media insults from the Labour group. Sorry? You'll have a chance in a minute. We need to remember who's sitting opposite us. A group led by someone who stated that if they were in power, they'd simply invest all energy-efficient social housing by insulating all of them. We've got 3,500. Actually, to be correct, 3,400. You're on record of saying that you would insulate all houses. The bid that's included in this evening's agenda for the Social Housing Decarb Fund is to put external wall insulation into 112 homes. 112 homes. Something that councillors all in this council chamber now will be aware that we're match funding at a cost of 1 million. I'll let the opposite bench do the maths. 1 million times 3,500. That's a group who are claiming that our council is irresponsibly run. A group that continuously states that all of their unsubstantiated claims and people-pleasing promises, oh no, that's their manifesto, are fully costed. In the meantime, back in the real world, our capable and responsible leadership are continuing with a robust programme, a capital programme of funding, largely funded by our HRA, the very document that we're voting to approve. Books need to be balanced, not cooked, which is why I'll be voting to approve the energy efficiency and retrofit strategy for tenants in Rugby for better quality homes and fuel efficient homes. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Slinger, you were on my roll next. Would you like to go ahead of Maggie O'Rourke?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and it's excellent to follow a spirited speech by Councillor Rabin, and I hope I'm inspired by his rhetoric and vim and vitality in what I'm going to say. I'm also inspired by what Councillor Parker said. This is really great. I'm feeling quite positive, actually, but not in the way you think. You've actually made the case for having more social housing for me. Yeah. What you've said is that the private rental sector is broadly expensive, and I would argue too expensive for many of our residents, which is why we, on the Labour side, and I suspect on some of these benches, believe in more social housing, or council housing as we used to call it, more social housing provision. And that was really the point that I wanted to make. And I thank the portfolio holder for her speech and the information, and it was interesting to hear. But I note that the right to buy sales are 21. I know it's not a policy that this council's leadership is responsible for. It's a Conservative policy from a long time ago. 2 acquisitions have been made, with 15 due to complete, which leaves a deficit of 4. Now, I don't hold you responsible for that in its entirety. But this is at a time when we need, as I believe Councillor Parker has shown to us with her excellent speech, we need more social housing, not less. So I simply ask the portfolio holder, what is your policy on the social housing, the council housing stock of this borough, council, of 3,443? It was good to read about Rounds Gardens. It was good to hear about Beat Place. But I'd just like a point of clarification on that. What is your policy on our social housing stock? Is it to grow it in the interests of our residents, particularly those who aren't very affluent and need help during this cost of living crisis? Is it to keep it stable, or is it to manage its slow decline?
Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's quite interesting that you say you're so prudent at managing it. It's a pity you don't have a word with your friends in number 10. And particularly, was it someone called Trust that sort of messed up with £65 billion worth of money? And I noted tonight as well that was not mentioned once in terms of one of the issues that we're facing. Make no mistake about it, the people of Rugby are suffering because of what your government's done. I'm not going to take that sort of feedback from a councillor that's been here about 3 years and hasn't seen some of the stuff that I've seen over the years. I have not ever said that we should do this, that and the other. You ought to listen a bit more carefully. I know what I've said. I put a budget in here a couple of years ago saying that we should be investing £2 or £3 million for the big reserves we've got into retrofitting and sort of looking at sort of making our houses more efficient. And I was laughed at. Now it's apparently the flavour of the month and we should be doing it. Oh, that's good. Anyway, the fact is the people of Rugby are not in a good place, a lot of them. I speak to people all the time. They are struggling. The housing, living in HMO for lots of people is their way of life now. It's not just there for 5 minutes. It's the way it's going to be for a long time. And, you know, this government's got a lot to answer for. It's really shocking. I feel really, really incensed about it. I mean, I know sort of 30, 40 years ago, a report was commissioned, and one of the biggest things they said that was most important in terms of people's health and well-being from the Black Report was a decent standard of housing, a good place to live, you know. And now we're in a situation where people are really struggling. We know that 1 in 200 families are just one paycheck away from being made homeless. That's the situation that we find ourselves in, you know. It's just dreadful. So I'm not going to take a load of rhetoric off someone on the back benches there, because it's not really funny, actually. It's not funny at all. It's really not funny. It's not funny that people are going to lose their homes. It's not funny, is it? It's not funny that we've got a 7% increase, is it? It's not funny that we're going to have a rate increase from the county in 3.9, was it? I dare say we're going to have a rate increase here. It's not funny that people are having to pay all that extra on their fuel bills. It's not funny that people can hardly afford to eat. So please don't check me in terms of being responsible when your government have got a big answer to this in terms of what they did. £65 billion. And that's not even talking about all the money they wasted on bloody apps that didn't work.
Councillors, can we just be reminded that we are dealing with the amendment, the Lib Dem group amendment, and can we come back to Councillor Roodhouse now in terms of a right to reply?
Oh, right, okay. Where were we? Yeah, 3.94%. Yeah, that was this afternoon, I think. So, but that's somewhere else, and then the police, and then whatever. I think Warwick District are going for 0, actually. Next week. Anyhow, I move away, don't I? No, I mean, we're willing to accept the friendly amendment coming through because, hey, we know where the votes are. But the serious point about it was to actually get something on the agenda to actually go that way. I think Councillor Sanderson makes a correct point in the communal areas. For anybody that goes in those buildings, you know, now or in the middle of summer, you know, you need your shorts and t-shirt on. They're a bit warm. Therefore, that can't be right, actually, that we're wasting energy like mad in some of these buildings. And the trouble is people have got to pay for it. And therefore, that's why we think it is a priority, or should be up the list much higher, going in to tackle that community, communal heating and areas, and those communal areas, I think, should be really important, because that will actually start to help and alleviate, certainly on the energy side, and therefore, you know, we can go through there. The second point around actually getting there, the independent living coordinators, I think they're an asset which we need to develop, and we probably actually, dare I say, we may need a few more to work out and about around the teams, but not just in the council housing stock, but actually starting to work and probably engage with the domiciliary care sector as well, because I think it's a massive job around the private element of this and about older, frailer people, which I was talking about today at Shire Hall, because that bulge is now working its way through the system. So we're now starting to see a lot of older but frailer people. So it's about living longer and good life, but that's actually changing. And if you look at the demographics, that bulge is working itself into the system now. And the whole system will be about keeping people in their homes for longer. And the adaptations, as the Chief Officer for Housing has highlighted, is also adaptations are a key issue. and they're getting bigger and more expensive, and you haven't got the money. We're spending the budget, it's going out probably on what, 2-3 houses. I think there was one that was mentioned in the report, about 25-30 grand or something. That's a big chunk of money out of the adaptations budget. So there's another question around that actually. Do we have to start thinking about putting more money into adaptations to actually keep people, even in our own rented stock, but elsewhere, and changing the style? Hence, that's the point about the housing reports coming through to actually set rent and all the rest of it. And, and Councillor Parker's right in that sense. I agree with you about bringing that through on the private rented sector and the rest of it. But it's actually having the analysis of what we've got sitting behind there. At the end of the day, I am the landlord. We are all the landlords of these properties, of those people, and people that will come through. We will come and go, but those properties will stay and develop, and I hope, that Councillor Crane and others are for growth and to see more council housing and to see more social housing, because that is the way to start tackling some of these particular problems. So if like, that's the underlining reasons behind that, and I think there would be general agreement around what I've said tonight around that. It's just how we get there, and I think we probably need some more pragmatism and less politics in actually getting through that and actually trying to work together instead of trying to point score from around here in that. And we can do that by working together around there. Bring back the housing committee is what I say.
Councillors, I have got a running list for the next items of the debate, so I haven't forgotten those who have raised their hand. But what I would like to do now is vote on the amendment, to the Lib Dem group amendment, and then we'll go back to the substantive motion. Please, could you raise your hands in favour? Those in favour of the amended Lib Dem amendment, please raise your hands. As amended. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. And now we will go on to return to the substantive amendment, and therefore I ask and I call on speakers on my list, starting with Councillor Robbins. Would you step forward? Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, but I think I'll save my comments for the main body of the report. Because we're still on.
We are in the main body now.
We are now in the.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you. In that case, I would just like to point out that I did want to say this before, but you didn't call me. The service charges are not going up by 285%, Councillor Sanderson. That's the gas prices. That's the gas prices. Okay.
Either way, it's the gas prices.
That's the gas prices. Yeah. Okay. First of all, I would like to address the issue of the housing stock that we have. And yes, it has dwindled. And I remember years ago when I was chairman of housing, Councillor Roodhouse, that we had housing stock of 4,500. So that shows how many have actually been sold off. But I actually agree that we should build more houses. And if you look at page 5, 2.6, on the Department of Levelling Up, Houses and Communities, DLUHC, introduced a cap on the use of right to buy receipts and acquisitions to help new supply, which will be phased in over 22-23, 23-24, which means basically that right to buy receipts can only be used towards 50% of those acquisitions. So we need to put that back into buying more properties, and that's exactly what this council is going to be doing. We are all for buying more houses, for building more houses, and where possible, if we can buy them from developers who are building social housing for us to buy, then that's the other way that we'll be going. Members may remember that, I think it was 2 years ago, that we set up a £14 million budget to buy properties for council houses. And I believe that there's still a little left in that pot now. So, yes, we are going to be building more houses for councillors, for council houses for people to rent. And I think it's absolutely right and proper that we do that, especially in these days where we have a much reduced number of houses. We're building for sale, but we really do need to start building more for rent. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Well done.
Councillor Moran.
Thank you very much. I guess before getting on to the main point, I wanted to take issue both with my colleague Councillor Slinger, but also Councillor Roothouse for complimenting Councillor Parker. I was actually going to comment on the inadequacy of the data in Table 4.4, where the intention is to use that data to make the claim that the council property is the most affordable in the borough. It might be, but from that table, which is not sourced, you cannot possibly say, because it doesn't reference when increases may or may not have been applied. But even before getting into that, we've sunk to a new low, I think, in this chamber, in talking about a random rant for searching on the internet, quoting one property as a basis for debate. It's idiotic. It's ridiculous. So putting data quality to one side, so it definitely needs to improve. I wanted to follow on from the excellent speech from Councillor Sanderson. There's, in this document, and the reason as the Labour group we haven't and wouldn't support this motion, is it's all very well fanciful talking about a potential increase of 11.5% to justify 7%. When nearly a third of tenants are not in receipt of universal credit or housing benefit, there's near enough a total absence of discussion on the actual impact on those people for a 7% increase. There's reference to RentSense software, which I actually have a subscription to. It's an investor software. It looks at rental default. We're not looking at the impact in the cost of living crisis. We're not looking at the impact of this increase on our tenants. So, yes, we're a landlord, but we also have a social responsibility to those people. And so, for that reason, this isn't something that we could ever have supported.
Councillor Parker.
Is the gentleman suggesting that my research, which I quoted, is I am knowingly misleading council?
I'm suggesting it's very crude analysis.
Honey, you don't know what crude is until you take me on.
Can I just interject here? Can I just remind members of the Code of Conduct and the obligations that all members have within this chamber to respect one another? And I would remind Councillor Moran and Councillor Parker of that, please.
I have the right to reply. So I will repeat again the reference I made at the start of my speech. I referenced the website, Rightmove. I referenced the time I did the research, 5:31 p.m. this evening. 152 properties within Rugby and 5 miles around it. The cheapest I found on the low to high search was a house of multiple occupation for £425 per calendar month. The highest was a 5-bedroom property in Newbold for £2,600 per calendar month. I've referenced my sources. I'm sorry if that's so vulgar for you.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't intend to get involved in this public dispute between the Labour Party and the Tory Party. It's rather unseemly what we're seeing at the moment. What I am concerned about is we as a landlord, as Councillor Ruggie has pointed out, It's the £33.50 on 4.5 for a service charge, and the £6.36, which I tot up, I'm sure my maths aren't wrong, to £39.86. That's almost a £40 increase per week for those people in that very sheltered housing. And I'm looking for assurances from the portfolio holder that she will move heaven and earth to make sure that those people get support from our independent living coordinators, CAB or Age UK, to get them the help that they're going to need to find that extra £40 a week. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Lowe.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. And what an exciting debate it has been. Full council's been somewhat dull in recent months. I've thoroughly enjoyed the entertainment tonight, so thank you, everybody, for that. So before I turn to the report specifically, I would like to touch more broadly on the topic of housing, which has been one of the key themes in the debate that we've had tonight. I mean, Councillor Slinger, you made a very good point that we need more social housing. I think you're absolutely right. We do need more social housing, which is detailed in part in this report. I think I'm not surprised to hear from Councillor Moran that it is the intention of the Labour group to oppose the motion this evening. And I think he did say that. He did say that. Oh, to not oppose. That's the rest of the sentence still applies, but I will retract that comment, Councillor O'Rourke. I think we need to put this in the broader context of some of the inconsistencies that we've seen from the Labour group around the issue of housing, both tonight and across some of the wider comments around broader housing issues. For a great many years, we've heard almost nothing from the Labour Party in Rugby on any of the key issues that affect the people of this borough. So it is heartening to hear that our official opposition is at last seeing fit to make some comments on what is happening in the borough. However, Madam Mayor, I cannot be the only one who has spotted some inconsistencies in what they have been saying. Councillor Srivastava earlier tonight expressed some concerns regarding homelessness in the borough, and I think he's right. He's right to be concerned. Homelessness is a serious issue wherever it occurs, and something which I'm sure we are all concerned about. And yet, despite the apparent concern regarding homelessness from the Labour group, they have simultaneously declared war on HMOs. Again, as I've said before, Madam Mayor, they have some concerns about HMOs which are legitimate, but there is surely a balance to be struck here. Now, of course, the Labour group would no doubt claim at this point that there would be no need for HMOs if more affordable housing was built, which was, if memory serves me correctly, the reason that each and every Labour councillor at the time voted for this administration's most recent local plan. But the trail of inconsistency does not end there, Madam Mayor, because having voted for that local plan, they have then subsequently denounced the local plan, only then to vote against a review of the very local plan they now claim to be unsatisfactory, despite having voted for it in the first place. And there is one final link in this trail of inconsistency. Having repeatedly demanded a policy on HMOs and expressed their dissatisfaction with broader housing provision in Rugby, the Labour group then voted against our recent motion to conduct a review of the local plan, a review which was proposed for a number of reasons, high on the list of which was to enable us to put in place a policy on HMOs. So, Madam Mayor, it is not in any way surprising that the Labour group decided once again to vacillate and continue with their inconsistent and incoherent approach to housing, announcing that they will not be voting one way or the other on tonight's motion. They say they want more social housing, and yet they vote against measures that will increase social housing. They want greater environmental safeguards, and yet they do not vote for measures which will provide these safeguards. They claim to care about homelessness, and yet they oppose measures such as the one before us tonight, which offers comprehensive and pragmatic support on this very issue. Madam Mayor, there are few more serious responsibilities for any local authority indeed for any society, than the provision of adequate housing. Housing is an issue which I know all of us in this chamber care passionately about. And the report before us tonight, as Councillor Crane has already stated, will not only enable us to ensure that we continue to provide a high-quality service to our tenants, it will also ensure that we continue to invest in our housing stock, providing much-needed homes to those who need them. As Councillor Crane has already highlighted, this borough continues to do outstanding work on the development and acquisition of new housing stock. The new Rounds Gardens and Byart Place developments will offer over 300 new social homes. But, Madam Mayor, this is not just about numbers, it is also about quality. The new developments will be of far greater quality and far higher standards of sustainability than those which were there before. These developments are something that this council, and indeed the whole of this borough, can look upon with immense pride, secure in the knowledge that they are just one of many ways which this administration is transforming this borough for the better. I'm also pleased to highlight the excellent work this council has been undertaking in improving the quality and sustainability of our existing housing stock, as detailed in the report. As has already been stated by many people in tonight's debate, these are challenging times in which this borough, in common with the rest of the world, faces high inflation and ever-increasing energy costs. We do not take the decision to increase rents at all lightly. Politics is usually the art of finding the best way through challenging circumstances, or, more often than not, it is about finding the least worst way through challenging circumstances. It is for this reason that, after much consideration, a modest increase in rents for our tenants is being proposed. In voting for this increase, we should all note that this council will remain by far the cheapest landlord in the borough, and that the increase that has been proposed is well below the current levels of inflation. So, Madam Mayor, it will surprise nobody that I will be joining my colleagues in voting for this report tonight, not because I believe it is perfect, or that it addresses everything that I would like to see it address. There is always more that we could do. But ultimately, we who sit here have to work within the constraints of reality. Madam Mayor, this is a robust, pragmatic and practical solution to the needs of our tenants, and not just our tenants today, our tenants of the future. And on that basis, I hope that members will join me in taking the responsible decision to vote this through.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just would like to respond to one of the points that Councillor Lowe made. I believe he said that we on this side have declared war on HMOs. And just for the record, I want to be absolutely clear, we have done no such thing. What we have done is expressed concerns. We have expressed concerns about the high concentration, and you could argue over-concentration of HMOs in certain wards, the urban ones that we represent. That is what we've done, and I and colleagues have taken proposals to him, and he's been gracious enough to listen and to move on some of them. But that's what we have done. We have not declared a war on HMOs at all. I wanted just to set the record straight on that point.
Councillor Roodhouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A bit like I don't want to get involved in all what's going on. There's a key point which I want to go back to, really. And it's a serious point in the sense of, if you like, we're going for 7% because that's what we were told to go at by the government. It's the rent cap. So it isn't what we've decided to do. It isn't, this is the greatest thing. The rent cap, which was set in the local government settlement, came out from government ministers and the Secretary said, you will set it at 7%. So don't try and elude yourselves that, this is all great stuff, because it's not. I mean, the key messages in the presentation from the Chief Officer says that. So it's 7%, because that's what the government allows us to do. If you want to go for 10 or 11%, you know, I don't know what happens after that, whether the Secretary of State, the Chief Officer, shaking his head. We have to do 7% roughly. We could go lower. You could go at 3% or 1% or 5%, but that's probably not very good if you want to achieve Barratt Place, Rounds Gardens and all the other work that we want to do within the HRA programme. You know, and that's the key point. That's the key point. If you don't do that, and you do go lower or whatever, that's the reality of the budget that's in front of us. You then can't achieve Barratt Place or Rounds Gardens because of the borrowing requirements and all the other bits and pieces to do with money and finance and the rest of it. But please don't think that we're actually setting the 7% because that's it. No, that's the local government settlement. It's the best deal we've got on the table. We can't go above it, but you could go below it, but that would actually damage the HRA and the work that we want to do.
Councillor Picker.
Sorry, but I do occasionally wonder whether I've read the same report as everyone else, because I've pulled it up for me now just to refresh my memory. 4.2, rent. There are a series of options and decisions to be made regarding the rent. There are options of 7%, options of 5%, options of 3%, and then consequences flowing from whatever we as an authority choose to do. And those are set out in the report. And the reports recommend... I appreciate we are. You'll see the point I'm coming to in a moment. The report makes a recommendation which we can choose to accept, we can choose to amend, we can choose to reject. I note that an amendment came forward from the Liberal Democrat group, which didn't touch on the issue of what the rent should be, and no amendment or alternative came forward from the Labour group. So, you know, you can't on the one hand say that the rent is going up by an amount and this is cataclysmic, and on the other hand, not offer any alternative, which is what I'm hearing this evening.
So I just wanted to...
I'm sorry,
no,
you haven't got a right to reply.
clarify one point. It's been made continually.
No, I'm afraid you can't.
It's been made continually.
In the debate, no. Can you take your seat, please?
A point of order, then. Okay?
Councillor Moran, if we can just clarify on what basis you are willing to speak.
Yeah,
and then we can...
order.
Points of order, if you can set out within the standing orders as to what point of order within the standing order has been breached, and then we can take a view on that.
There's a continual reference to us opposing the local plan review.
That's not a point of order within the council standing orders.
We're advocating a partial review.
Councillor Moran, if you can just clarify that, then you are able to speak. Okay.
Councillor Crane, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, it certainly has been a lively debate tonight, and I think what it does show is that everybody in this chamber really cares about housing in Rugby, and most importantly, providing more affordable housing in Rugby, and that encompasses housing for social rent and other types of affordable housing, both to own and to rent. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. I think we're all agreed on that. And, you know, as Councillor Robbins has said, you know, it's very much part of this administration's plans to increase the number of homes for social rent. Indeed, myself and Councillor Robbins have spent many years working on the Barratt Place and the Rounds Gardens regeneration plans. And indeed, we have pressed for it to be entirely homes for social rent, and that's what it is going to be, all built to a very high standard. So I just want to make that clear, that everybody's absolutely united in that front, and as we should be, So I just want to come on and address some of the other points that we made, and I do particularly want to address Councillor Sanderson and Councillor Roodhouse's points about the service charge increases. As I did mention in my main speech, I think we have to distinguish between the actual service charges and those elements which relate to communal heating systems, and most particularly gas price rises, and that is the 258 or 85, I can't remember, the 258 that you're referring to, Councillor Sanderson. And I just want to say, of course, it is really concerning, that level of rise, and I'm going to come on in a minute to just give you some assurances as to what we are doing about it. And I myself have raised this with the Chief Officer on a number of occasions and, you know, asked for certain provisions to be put in place, and I'll come on to reassure you. But I just think it's important that we distinguish between the actual service charges and what are effectively utility costs for individual properties, in the same way that all of us would pay the individual bills for the gas or the electricity that we use. It's only because it relates to a communal heating system where they all share the same boiler, and then it's recharged through the council, but it comes via the energy company. So I just wanted to make that clear, because I think it is, in a way, it was a slight misnomer in the report, and it should perhaps be redefined next year when it's in the report. But I did just want to come on to some of your specific concerns about what is happening in relation to the residents, because yes, I completely agree with you. They are vulnerable residents, and we do very much want to help and support them, and we understand that this is a really challenging rise for them. So some of the things that are being put in place already are CAB and Age UK will be coming in to do a drop-in session to speak to the residents about their concerns and to give them options of what help is available. And also, we're working with Act on Energy to look at ways to support them. I've also asked the Chief Officer to get some people in her team to contact the energy company and to talk to the energy company about what support it can offer, because of course it is the energy company that's putting such a huge rise on there. And also, officers have spoken to Warwickshire County Council in relation to the local welfare scheme. Yeah, and again, residents, you know, should get in touch, and they will be ready and willing to help. So I just wanted to offer you reassurances that, you know, the help is there, and the council does stand ready to step up and assist people. So just wanted to give you that assurance. In terms of some of the other points that were raised, Councillor Roodhouse, you talked about wanting more information in the report. I mean, it does contain a lot of information, but we can certainly look to putting more information in there. I mean, I do share your view that I think we should have transparency and lots of information. In terms of what work is being done to identify vulnerable tenants, you know, the Rent Sense software does really help to pick up people that might be having problems, and the teams are reaching out to people that they think are going to be vulnerable. But we always say, you know, if anybody knows of constituents who are struggling, you know, please urge them to get in touch, and the help is there for them. What were some of the other points? Yeah, I've addressed Councillor Slinger's point about more affordable housing, which we absolutely do want. And to Councillor O'Rourke, I would say, you know, we absolutely do get that people are struggling, and I think everybody here is concerned about it, and we're all trying to do everything we can to help and support them. But as we've said tonight, we've got to get that balance right between, you know, maintaining the service, and the costs are going up equally within the service itself. Yeah, in terms of the points that Councillor Moran raised about where do the figures come from, regular checks go out to the market and look at what the rental figures are, and they're drawn together regularly and that's where the figures in that table came from. And again, you know, we monitor very closely, you know, how people are paying their rents or not paying their rents, and we always try and work with tenants to help them when they are falling into arrears. So I hope that I've answered everyone's questions. If people still do have points to raise, then please do feel free to contact me directly. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. We will now take a vote on the substantive motion as amended. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Item 8, notices of motion pursuant to Standing Order 11 in accordance with Council's constitution. No motions on notice have been received for consideration this evening. Item 9, correspondence. Is there any correspondence, Chief Executive?
There is none, Madam Mayor.
Item 10, Common Seal. I move that the Common Seal be affixed to the various orders, deed and documents referred to in the agenda. Who will second the motion? Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Item 11, motion to exclude the public under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972. Under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of information defined in paragraphs 1 and 3 and Schedule 12A of the Act. I so move. Who will second the motion?
I will, Madam Mayor.
Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. That concludes the public part of the meeting.